It's probably one of the most familiar quotes we have from the Gospel of Luke, that which we hear today. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye," and then you don't even notice that there's a wooden beam in your own eye? So Jesus says to remove the wooden beam in your eye first. Then you'll see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. In other words, how is it that we, frail and sinful as we are, how do we ever find the gall or the nerve to point out faults in others when we ourselves are full of them? And we all know that none of us knows anybody who is perfect. So what is it with us that we can get judgmental, or we're too hard on others, or expect things that are unrealistic? One more reminder of how imperfect we are as creatures. St. Ignatius of Loyola, writing to a young Jesuit named Bartolomeo Romano, put it this way, quote, "Occupy yourself in beholding and bewailing your own imperfections, rather than contemplating the imperfections of others. Try to give more edification in the future, and do not, I beg you, try the patience of those who love you in Jesus Christ." End quote. Many times this is all the more true when it comes to our families. One of my favorite quotes is from the author Anne Lamott in her book Tender Mercies. She says, quote, "I tell you, families are definitely the training ground for forgiveness. At some point, you pardon the people in your family for being stuck together in all their weirdness, and when you can do that, you can learn to pardon anyone, even yourself eventually." She continues, "Family, they've seen you at your worst. Not much you can hide from each other. Maybe that's why our emotions are usually at their most raw when we deal with family. In how intensely we argue, in how we are fiercely loyal to each other. I think that's why most of us stay close to our families, no matter how neurotic the members, how deeply annoying or dull, because when people have seen you at your worst, you don't have to put on the masks as much. And that gives us license to try on that radical hat of liberation, the hat of self-acceptance." End quote. And that's true, because our families have definitely seen us at our worst. My brother Jay is a year and a half younger than me, and we shared a room from childhood through high school. We're fiercely protective of each other, although we have very little patience for each other as well. It's as if it's okay when we fight and argue with each other because it's us, but I would never stand for anyone criticizing him or giving my brother a hard time. That's not their role. That's my role. And we've gone many times over the years pointing out splinters in each other's eyes while ignoring those in ours. And they are often cause for arguments and the like. We eventually end up forgiving each other, but then the cycle starts all over again. But hopefully with each instance, something else has happened. Because forgiveness, as we know, forgiveness never changes the past. Forgiveness changes the future. Forgiveness does not necessarily wash away the hurts and the resentments that have built up inside us. Sometimes it does, but not always. But forgiveness allows for the future to be different. It allows for our relationships to start on a different foot. It allows for our conversations to be more civil, more loving, more tender. Forgiveness changes the future in that it allows the future to happen in ways that otherwise might never have been. Forgiveness changes the future because forgiveness gives us hope. And hope, as you've heard me say many times before, is that virtue which makes possible our faith. Why? Well, the French poet Charles Péguy proposed that God himself was not surprised by the virtues of faith or love. He says what surprises God is hope. Listen. The faith that I love best, says God, is hope. Faith doesn't surprise me. It's not surprising. I'm so resplendent in my creation that in order really not to see me, these poor people would have to be blind. Love, says God, well, that doesn't surprise me either. It's not surprising these poor creatures are so miserable that unless they had a heart of stone, how could they not have love for one another? How could they not love their brothers and sisters? How could they not take the bread from their own mouth, their daily bread, in order to give it to unhappy children who pass by? And my son had so much love for them. But hope, God says, hope is something that surprises me. Even me. That is surprising. That these poor children see how things are going and believe that tomorrow things will be better. That they see how things are going today and believe that they will get better tomorrow morning. That is surprising. And it's by far the greatest marvel of our grace. And I'm surprised by it myself. And my grace must indeed be an incredible force. Indeed, the wonder of God's grace, it's what fills us with hope. It's what helps us recognize that our own eyes are full of splinters. It's what allows us to seek forgiveness, the same forgiveness that changes the future. So back to my splinters. Or rather, I reread the reading, and it's a wooden beam in my own eye. Everyone else has splinters, and mine happens to be a beam. It's a bit harsh of Jesus, but it's true, because that which I can see in others quite well, I often fail to perceive in me. But there is good news, because God's grace that is always free, grace that always exists, grace that is always available, grace that is always victorious, can transcend repression, addiction, and every other internal or external power that seeks to oppress the freedom of the human heart. Because grace is where our hope lies. And that is where we will find God, splinters, wooden beams, and all.